Aleister Crowley once famously remarked that black magic was any kind of magic which is not concerned with the mystical self or personal development. This can be taken as meaning that any form of magic which is studied and or performed to affect or cause change in others or society as a whole without granted permission is in fact dark sorcery. This would include having your emotions manipulated by an entertainment extravaganza, or in the aftermath of some horrific human tragedy. Good intentions are rarely for the benefit of the good. The only magical energy we have a right to alter and affect is our own. Anything else is a violation of natural law. Yet many people embark on the path of magical study with the sole intention of obtaining revenge on another person, or attempting to affect the nature of the society around them, as well as the free choices made by the people in their lives in order to line their own pockets or exploit them in one way or another. Terms such as magic, sorcery, witchcraft, hexing, and so on are words which are universally handicapped solely by the images which they conjure up among the mass of society, in that within our modern world most people are conditioned to automatically ridicule or be amused upon hearing them. We are told as soon as we exit our childhood years that such things belong to the far-off, backward, and ignorance-bounded miasma of ancient history, or else they are retained during the present era only within the logical fallacies of the misguided and deluded. Is this a rational and reasonable assumption which most people are making in reaction to the very mention of terms associated with the study and practice of occultism, sorcery, and ritual magic processes? By means of the ever-fluctuating miasma of modern existence, Western humans have been carefully cultivated into bio-psychological marionettes suspended inside a sea of sorcery. Real sorcery and real magic, and the ones on the receiving end of this spellcraft are, for the most part, unaware of what is actually being done to them. Perhaps both I, the creator of this film, as well as you, the viewer, are indeed deluded enough into believing that by the power of our will alone, coupled with the implementation of specific rites and processes, that we can actually change the very nature of reality around us, as well as influence the outcome of future events. Yet while you might assume that you and I are both too educated, too intelligent, and even too sane to believe in a world where spells, curses, and enchantments are real, consider the following curious and relatively recent historical event. In June 1991, a conference was held at Fordham University in New York entitled The Occult and Modern Soviet Russian Culture, and which was sponsored by none other than the highly influential Soros Foundation, along with several other well-respected endowments and research councils who gave their enthusiastic blessing to the event. An academic study into the practice of magic and the occult within the Soviet Union, paid for and attended by some of the most powerful individuals and groups in this world today. The list of professors and influential figures who attended this conference, where the magical booty from the Soviet Union was first presented, would have been enough to wipe the smirk off the face of the average self-professed debunker. Ask yourself why, practically as soon as the Iron Curtain and Soviet Union fell, did scores of Western academics representing some of the most esteemed universities in North America and from around the world embark on something akin to an occultic fire sale in order to get their hands on as many books, documents, and especially the findings of scientific research programs dealing with the occult and magic during the heyday of the Soviet Union, if in fact all this stuff is just nonsense. We are not merely talking about an antiquarian expedition to locate some lost books of European and Asiatic esoteric history, but the specific procuring of documentation and research papers into Soviet occultic sciences and practices within a recently fallen superpower during the scientifically minded 20th century. Why was such time, academic resources, and serious money put into collecting the woo of the Soviets? The answer is because academia, powerful bodies, and certain institutions want to get their hands on this magical research and keep it exclusively for themselves alone, just as they have done so since the time of the Enlightenment. Not only this, but the text and research pertaining to the occultic legacy of the Soviet Union were eventually placed under the jurisdiction of the Library of Congress in the United States alongside, just by sheer chance, the occult and esoteric documents and files of Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich, which were captured by the US Army during the final weeks of the Second World War. If indeed none of this stuff was in any way real, or at any level worthy of study and examination, then why bother collecting and archiving it with the same level of importance that was given to German rocketry development or Soviet submarine design? You and the people you know in your everyday life may scoff at the idea of magic and that of magical forces, considering it to be absurd and laughable. However, the people who control your thoughts and culture, and that of the intellectual and political destiny of this planet, take magic and sorcery very seriously indeed. Not only that, they have always done so. This is the reason why Roman generals took time to study the magic of the Druids and how they influenced their own barbaric society. While today those who control the constantly meandering spectrum of what you think are your own personal opinions give you the high priests of reductionism in the form of Richard Dawkins, Brian Cox, or Bill Nye, in order to make you feel brilliant, clever, and reasoned. And all of this while the powerful captains of modern society and popular culture are attending academic conferences into the occult and magic. While you're watching some National Geographic TV documentary bluffing you into thinking that the great stone monuments of the ancient world were created by superstitious ape-like simpletons with deer antler picks and reed ropes, the men and women of the state-sanctioned scientific and political common sense are busying themselves with the complexity of ancient grimoires, the study of occultic and supernatural forces within and outside the human body, along with the projection of mental thoughts beyond the human brain. And all of this while finding ways to make this magical horde of the elite work for their own power and agendas. In response to this revelation surrounding the nature and objectives of the 1991 Fordham Conference, the average person would simply respond by claiming that the academic collections and studies of the Soviet occult literature and research materials was merely acquired as part of the overall historic record, perhaps an insight into the sociology of the USSR, or perhaps something to point to as proof of the Soviets being lost as a political administration, as well as an expression of their failed political idealism. If this be the case, then how does this explain why the atheistic and scientifically minded Soviet leadership supported the work of occult artists such as V.N. Shekrigin, an artist whose paintings dealt with the very idea of the Soviet sciences being used in space travel and cosmology into the pursuit of what was termed extra-ecclesiastical activity, that being using Soviet spacecraft and radio telescope technologies to resurrect dead ancestors on the Earth and on other planets. The Soviet leadership were doing this for the same reason Cornelius Vanderbilt put his financial speculation into the hands of a stage actress and mystic named Victoria Woodhull. Because magic does work, it does produce results, and that these results are both self-evident and verifiable if you bother to examine the history of the occult, as well as the many scientific research programs which have seriously studied and evaluated magical and other unknown supernatural phenomena and forces to a far greater degree than is generally known by the average man or woman in the street. This situation still continues to the present day. The use of magic in the affairs of the Russian state was not just limited to the Soviet Union by any means. In the 17th century, General James Bruce, or Count Jakob as he was commonly known, was a scientific advisor to Peter the Great. Irrespective of this grand title, his position was more akin to that of a royal wizard. He was also Russia's first royal astronomer and one of the most powerful individuals behind the design and construction of Russia's first large scientific telescope, which was housed within the top floor of the Shukarev Tower in Moscow. Of Scottish noble descent, Bruce's personal books and manuscript collection formed a substantial part of what eventually became the Russian Academy of Sciences library. The majority of these texts were occultic and alchemical in nature. His observatory allegedly also contained some of the most forbidden books devoted to the study and practice of dark magic, and which were rumoured to have been walled up inside the Shukarev Tower before his death. The Shukarev Tower itself also housed the Moscow School of Mathematics and Navigation, and time again we see this link from John Dee in the Elizabethan court to the influence of the Templars and Freemasonry during the Great Portuguese Age of Discovery, that being the connection between royal occultism, navigation and seafaring. Count Jakob's main function was to create a magical almanac known as the Black Book, using a system of divination referred to as the Water of Life, which would cause demons to appear and offer their services, generally in regards to revealing future events to the leaders of the Russian state or anyone else who possessed Count Jakob's almanac. The Black Book itself remained in print until 1912, which incidentally is the same year that Rasputin ostensibly became the state mystic of Russia due to his influence over the Tsarina Alexandria. The Shukarev Tower itself was looted and demolished eventually by the Soviet government in 1934. No records exist as to what happened to the purported vast library of black magic texts rumoured to have been held there. We can only assume that if the Soviets found them, then they must have held onto them. Atheism for the masses, magic and sorcery for the powerful elite, regardless of any prevailing political or theocratic associations. Cornelius Vanderbilt became incredibly wealthy by employing the magical services of the magnetic healer and spiritualist Victoria Woodhull, who incidentally was also the first woman to run for the President of the United States. While on the other hand, the Soviets realized they were doomed as an idealistic society when on April 26, 1986, the number 4 reactor at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant ruptured, and then this became a catastrophic nuclear disaster. Soon it was recognized that the reactor had been cursed from the start, and when the Soviet leadership lost control of the situation, invariably sorcery took over. The term Chernobyl within Slavic witchcraft just so happens to be the Russian version of the incantation Abracadabra. The power plant itself was built within the heart of a Ukrainian magical landscape, steeped in Slavic occultism and folklore traditions. At first, the Soviet leadership kept the disaster quiet, but when the full implications of the disaster became apparent, coupled with their sense of dread and doom at the realization of the curse having been unleashed, the Russian news agency TASS chose April 30th, or the Witches' Sabbath, of Walpurgis Night, so as to break the news of the disaster to the world at large. If this wasn't remarkable enough, within the Ukrainian language the word Chernobyl also translates as the name for a toxic plant known as wormwood. Within Hebrew mysticism, the term for wormwood translates as la'ana, which means cursed, in both Arabic and Hebrew. The 1991 conference at Fordham University, funded by the likes of George Soros and attended by some of the top academics of the time, came into being for no other reason than these Western academics and globalists are just as amazed and fascinated by the events, their unfolding mythological aspects, as well as the synchronistic occurrences surrounding the emergent sorcery of the Chernobyl disaster, as much as you are probably hearing about this right now. They were fully aware that there are forces beyond the material world which are profoundly interconnected with human consciousness, that these supernatural events and experiences do in fact exist, and that these forces can be called upon directly or else become unleashed through curses, and can also be used to effect changes within this material reality, as well as predict, if not influence, the outcome of future events. At some point, the notions of coincidence and chance have to step to one side, and then other, less prosaic assumptions demand to be entertained. Naturally, the elites will never admit such things as a profound interest, let alone their well-documented beliefs into magic and the occult publicly. A lot of it has to do with the fact that they can't measure or accurately reproduce these tests using the accepted scientific methods. They are put at something of a useful disadvantage by the demands of their own ethos, in that what they can't fully understand themselves puts them under no obligation to explain such phenomena to the rest of us. Denial of the craft has always been the standard practice since the formation of Freemasonry, along with the cover story being put out there that magic rituals of these occult societies are merely a social aspect of the craft, partaken for fraternal and traditional pursuits, enacted by reasoned, respectable and rational gentlemen. The same reasoned, respectable and rational gentlemen who hired English prostitutes as personal magicians. The same reasoned, respectable and rational gentlemen who took the spiritualism movement of the late Victorian era very seriously indeed, even into the domain of sciences and emerging technologies of the period, and the same respectable and rational gentlemen who then filled magical orders such as the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the same leaders of society who tell you to laugh and scoff at the occult and magical ritual, while they themselves take it very seriously indeed. The class system didn't begin and end with economics alone. Their gated communities protect much more than the family jewels and silver cutlery from the hands of the unclean and the profane who may wish to acquire them. We, all of us, are forces which represent the untapped potential of magic and the occult, located and within and deriving from the lower poles of our consciousness, and it is a part of us as much as our biological processes operating within inside our bodies. Our very life force comes complete with a star of magical potential which sparkles inside us all. Like the ancient megalithic builders of the past, this star can be aligned and called upon to shine its light towards illuminating locations and ideas we have created and set into conjunction with its presence. Firstly, we have to be aware and accept its existence by removing the clouds of social conditioning and modern existence which hides it from our earthly gaze. The greatest revelation which I have uncovered from a lifetime of study of magic and occult sciences is that we all have a shining star of magical potential contained within us, and this inner power is waiting to be fed and allowed to burn as brightly as possible. Magic is very real indeed, and all of us are capable of altering the material world to some degree or another by following specific steps and processes. Some are better than others at achieving this, but we will all attain results if we put a saddle on the devil's back and ride him towards a better neighborhood inside this present purgatory of human existence which we resided in. Of course, magic itself is subject to limitations, our own personal limitations. The baseline from which you start upon your magical and occultic path is the starting location that determines where you can go from. Born in an inner city ghetto, you can get out of the slum and improve your life no end comparative to how you started out in life. Born wealthy, you can use magic to allow you to appreciate your good fortune in winning the lottery of life and use it for the betterment of humanity and the world in general, assuming that is, you are not a class-obsessed aristocrat with a megalomaniac self-ordained destiny to control the existence of the human race as if they were your own pets. For now, we'll just assume that you're the average man or woman with an interest in this magic stuff, and naturally enough wondering if there's anything to it, and can you improve your personal experience as a human being during the course of your lifetime upon this spinning blue and white ball we call home. I'm here to tell you that you can. Not only can you use magic to improve your own life, but you can also use it to defend yourself from those who wish to cause you harm. The complex rituals of the Victorian and earlier eras, while having great value in their own right, are ostensibly redundant in the modern age where information is subjected to more and more levels of compression and minimalization. The same emotional reactions can be unleashed by someone listening to a hip-hop rap today that would have taken a 3-hour-long Wagner operatic production 100 years ago to generate. We are moving into more simplified but equally effective methods of human experience, and magic is no less subject to this ongoing rationalization of consciousness. Therefore, magic and cult practices are well within the grasp of a large proportion of the human race than has been generally available in Western times since the Middle Ages, when the social order of things became far more complex and centralized. The prohibition and ruthless extermination of anything connected to witchcraft, folk magic or sorcery came about as a result of an increasingly powerful elite mandated by the Church of Rome, who felt threatened by the folk magic of the times, as well as other types of witchcraft and surviving paganism, which was also very much part of everyday life in both urban and rural poor communities of this period. Folk magic and its witches were subsequently brutally suppressed, and from this the rise of elite esoteric occult and magical orders then began in earnest. Although securing the authority of the emerging medical profession, academia, as well as the Abrahamic religions played a huge part in this, the primary reason for the suppression of magic, sorcery, and folk witchcraft was to wipe it out among the masses, while retaining the occultic and magical sciences within the exclusive ownership of the ruling elite. In other words, the ruling elite took what was central to all human cultures and then kept it for themselves alone. Once the age of witch burnings and persecutions was completed, ridicule and mockery then replaced the breaking wheel and the thumbscrew. Until recent times, this has remained the case. The upper echelons of society, from the major religions to the aristocratic classes, have used the education system to reason the supernatural out of us, when they themselves still continue to study and practice ritual magic before our very eyes. Everything, after all, comes down to energy, money, food, fuel, sex, politics, and the corporate power, and therefore magic and the occult sciences are energy forms which the wealthy and powerful have kept from the rest of us, just as they have done with their crown jewels and vast tracts of private land. There is no difference, for example, between the opening and closing ceremonies of the Olympic Games, World Cup finals, or the Super Bowl, and that of the magic and occult rituals which took place at Stonehenge, Delphi, or Karnak in ancient times. The only difference being that the shaman, druids, or priests of the past were honest and upfront with the population in telling them that they were performing ritual magic, while today we are told it's just entertainment. Then we somehow feel compelled to purchase a brand of diet soft drink we previously never desired. While folk magic never fully went away, but rather evolved into customs and superstitions, today with the advent of the internet it's become resurgent once more. Albeit in a less localized form, by spooling itself from out of the electromagnetic spectrum and into a new generation of healers, wise women, druids, and herbalists. Websites and endless online articles have opened up a whole new world of delicious heresies for those out seeking to find them. We no longer need to acquire a vast personal library on sorcery and the occult in our homes, although it is vital to own at least some paper and bound text, where there is an important magical experience in the very act of doing so. More people than ever are taking part in the greatest occult revival since the final remnants of the English witchcraft laws were abolished in 1951. The implications of this are enormous. Although this film is not aimed at the solo practitioner, I would not discourage people, if they wish to do so, from joining ceremonial magic circles and groups. Apart from the social aspects, there are helping hands and often valuable guidance to be found within them. Ultimately, you are seeking to generate a greater charge emanating from the star within yourself. If this arises by means of joining a Wicca, Golden Dawn, OTO, or any other group, and then partaking in their respective rituals and studies, then by all means do so. This is your experience, and some people prefer their star to hang by itself in the cosmos, while others enjoy the sympathetic beauty of forming a constellation. It's your call. Although I would suggest that people read several of the books out there on magic practice to completion before making any decision one way or the other. By the time you are done working your way through all the texts, you will know your own magical self, as well as the purposeful magical experiences which have been imposed upon your life a whole lot better. Even experiences you have now take for granted, such as your perception of the passing of time, will take on a whole new level of awareness. Consider, for example, how your mind processes time depending on the situation you are experiencing at certain moments. When you are bored or nervously waiting for the results of something, time drags into seemingly endless and torturous experiences. By contrast, consider how time flies while enjoying a vacation or being at a rock concert. The perception of the space-time experience is completely subjective to the consciousness of the individual who is experiencing it. Your mind speeds up or slows down according to external sensory factors. It's an extremely personal sensation of perception. A person sitting next to you on a train could be experiencing the unfolding of space-time within their own conscious mind to a completely different degree that you may be personally experiencing on the same train, on the same track, going in the same direction and at the same speed. Now let's apply this experience to a person who has become a magician, generating the same effect within another person by making them wait in anticipation for something they strongly desire, and then delivering what they desire and causing the clock speed of their brains to rapidly increase in accordance with how they have actually altered their own perception of space-time awareness and experiences. This is but a simple demonstration of how magic can be used. From the long, endless pauses taken by Adolf Hitler before addressing the Nuremberg mass rallies to the last 5 minutes of a soccer game in which your team is winning and every single moment appearing to take longer than all the previous 90 minutes of play. To the moment before the birth of your child, seemingly lasting longer than the first few years of their lives. These are all, in one way or another, very real magical experiences. The normal rules of space-time were altered. A watch kettle never boils for the same reason, in that we are placing our concentration into a process, for the most part, is outside our control, and which we are at the end of. A process that began when the turbines belonging to the electrical utility provider as they started generating electrical current. In other words, waiting for the kettle to boil is teaching you a valuable lesson about the process of magic. You are not there at the start of the process, so you can't control the outcome apart from switching off the kettle. Your torturous anticipation and impatience is the reveal of your overall detachment from the outcome. Your subconscious mind knows that you did not generate the electricity to boil the kettle, so it slows down space-time in order to teach you something. It takes seemingly forever, because you have no control over the full dynamics of the situation. The real magician in this case is the electrical utility company who change steam, rushing water, wind or sunlight into flowing electrons of pure current, which have then passed through your electrical meter and into your kettle or stove. You are not controlling the game, you are just part of it. The end outcome is the electrical utility company getting you to pay for the charge, and your subconscious mind is letting you know this with each torturous second you are waiting for the kettle to boil. The subconscious mind never lies, and is the greatest teacher and mentor of any magician or sorcerer. You pay attention to how it alters your own perceptions of space-time, as you are being informed of a wasted charge you needed for something else which you can implement and control yourself. Magic is not an art suited to those seeking instant and immediate gratification and outcome. Herein lies the greatest misunderstanding of magic, that we can implement change within the material universe instantly. Even a flash of lightning is a result of geothermal and electrical processes which have taken a certain time period and under very specific circumstances to develop in the atmosphere over the course of the storm's life cycle. The process is not automatic and is very much subjected to the forces of accidental fate, as what may have begun as a pure stream of energy eventually manifests into a fork of lightning discharging downwards, and although this still hits the target, it might miss the target and produce a surprising outcome. Consider Mjolnir, the hammer of Thor. It still had to be forged from the raw materials in the workshop of the dwarven magicians Ithri and Brokkr. The finalization of any magical event presents the collective outcome over time, and the unfolding of the craft, spell, or conjuration is often surprising, poetic, and even ironic. As Thor found out when Loki, having transformed into a horsefly, bites the dwarven magician artisan Brokkr on the eyelid and makes him lose concentration at a vital moment, and thus causes Thor's hammer to have a shorter handle than was intended. When working in magic, prepare to encounter Loki in many guises and outcomes. Patience is vital in the magician's processing, as well as adaptability to unexpected happenstances during the course of the magical process is what makes a difference between an apprentice and a master.